Related papers 46 to 50. A letter pertaining to journal tending. Hello, dear Joseph. Your letter is most insightful, fun, and sincere. I can understand Rachel's joy in corresponding with you. It is just before a spring storm here, I hope. The trees and other green things are eager for the rain. Black clouds are gathering in the west. A north wind hints of a blow, and the new apple blossoms are dancing in anticipation. Joseph, your seminary friend sounds like a genuine, greatest character I've ever known person. You asked, how would I handle such a situation as that? A man who loves dogs so much he has 40 of them in his home. Are you ready for this? I would decide to know this man better than anyone I'd ever known, as if I were going to write a paper about him to submit for publication. Most certainly, I'd not attempt to change him. Day after day, I'd let him tell me exactly how he feels about dogs and why, and where his grand love for them developed. With all my heart, I'd try to get inside this man's heart, because there is something special there, very special, Joseph. I would let him become my writing discipline for a month or so, or longer if it takes longer to hear him open up and pour out his inmost feelings. How does he relate his spiritual ideas to his surroundings and pets and friends? Such inner questions would be tremendously interesting, coming from one who lives, as you relate, sleeping with his animals. But change him? Never. If he were to act like other people, he wouldn't be as unique, different, unusual, remarkable, distinctive, divergent, incomparable, or sweet, would he? Gosh, Joe, this guy is extraordinary. Learn from him. We all play roles, don't we? Look at the silly one I have. How did I get saddled with being a luminary or an authority on anything? Everyone is a luminary. Over the years, so many have tried to change my way of looking at the world. Oh, how the churches tried to conventionalize and modify my insights. Suppose they had succeeded. The notes from Woodsong would be relative at best and ordinary. Charles is Charles, unique and beautiful. If Charles didn't act as he does, Charles wouldn't be Charles anymore, but only our notion of what he should be. So there you have it, Joseph. As you look closer into Charles' feelings and tender places, he will begin to appear different to you. Right? It's sorta like taking a walk in the woods one has been afraid of to walk in before. It appears different when you get into the place, and there are new things to discover there. Our first attempt is to change the whole woods into a conventional place we are accustomed to and aren't afraid of. But when that doesn't work, and it isn't supposed to, we change ourselves by broadening our outlook. The more I think of your friend Charles, the more I'd like to know him, to really know him. The marvel is, when we know like that, the one out there changes right before our eyes. An old man in the Smoky Mountains taught me what contradistinction means. One day I asked why he stayed in those lonely mountains. He had been retained as a caretaker by the government, but was one of the original settlers of Cade's Cove. He said he stayed because it was so beautiful. Then I asked him, he was a country bumpkin to young arrogant me, what he meant by beauty. With great patience, he told me about leaving the cove and going to work in Washington, D.C. during the war. While he was there, he had unbelievable difficulty, losing his wife and son and developing a lung ailment of some sort from all the factory smoke. When the war was over, he returned to the cove alone. He said he looked around and saw the blue sky for the first time in his life. He tasted the sweet water for the first time and watched the beauty of the changing seasons. All things he had seen and known many times before, but now he knew what real beauty was, having seen so much that wasn't like his Cades Cove. I spent many days camping there and hours talking to that kindly old man who sold honey, 50 cents a quart jar, on the narrow dirt road that runs through the cove. His notched log cabin is still there in the park. Suppose someone had changed him, Joseph. No, he changed me, and that's always the only place real change can honestly happen. Here, as I, identity, never out there with people. I change me by understanding the divine I more fully, and then I see people more clearly. I hope I haven't bothered you with too many words, Joseph. I am practicing on my fancy new word processor, a little computer that some thoughtful folks knew would make my work easier. I'm learning slowly but surely. Everything gets named here at Woodsong, and the computer's name is Rabbi Moses Goldberg. He's quite a guy. Librarian, lexicographer, file clerk, typist, accountant, indexer, semanticist, and all-round good guy, willing to work at all hours for cheap, as long as the electricity is on, and it looks like it may go off at any moment as this storm approaches. Kindest love to you, Joseph, and many thanks for your encouragement, without which I couldn't write these letters. This work at Woodsong is your work, too. Woodsong, 1984. The Bible in the Light of Subjectivism. Objectively, the Bible is a history of revelation and prophecy. Objectively, it has served to bring the central core of mankind to love God and men. Subjectively, the Bible confirms our own inner revelations. That is, we find our glimpses echoed in the Bible, confirming the validity of our own discovery. Objectively, the world looks for its inspirational glimpses from reading and talking about the Bible. The Bible has been the ship's rudder. The subjective comforter and the historic Jesus. People who study the truth via subjectivism or metaphysics tend to think of Christ as God, as truth, but not necessarily as man, especially physical man, stressing the Christ rather than the man. The metaphysician speaks of Christ but seldom of Jesus. Metaphysics, carried to its absolute extreme, having dismissed the mortal man, must dismiss all mortality or men. So, it sublimates history and must, in consequence, think of the biblical or historic Jesus and all events in time as illusion or myth. This is not peculiar to the West alone. One finds the same thing in Eastern philosophy. Let me state quickly that neither the Christ nor Jesus is a myth. When first the mountain becomes not a mountain, our move from objectivism to the discovery of metaphysics, for a time the concept of a mortal man goes out of the Christ for most earnest metaphysicians. Well then, how does one at this level of things, before he has moved beyond metaphysics, describe the historic Jesus of Nazareth? When one of the good old-timey fundamentalist churchmen collars him, how does the metaphysician respond? Not very well, clearly, or there would have been greater interest in subjective studies. A good statement that can withstand the onslaught of bickering theology needs to be made, but to do that is tantamount to making a rock fall up. Here is that question, recently put to me for the 10,000th time. What is the significance or relationship of Jesus Christ to me as this awareness I am? Let me try to answer that question to the satisfaction of a thinker. Truth is applicable at all levels of human understanding, but the metaphysician has never been able to give a satisfactory answer to the fundamentalist churchman. Not just because the churchman hasn't come to accept subjectivism yet, but because subjectivism can't make the whole statement of truth. However, the child of us can. In reply to the question above, I must answer from the metaphysical, subjective, middle position, so it will all remain subjectively correct, but still be understood objectively by the one who hasn't caught the subjective idea yet. I begin a full answer. I can speak only for myself. Subjectively, people and history unfold within my awareness. I have no awareness of Moses, Abraham, Jesus, Genghis Khan, Dolly Parton, or anyone outside this conscious, subconscious awareness that writes and reads these words. I take myself to be this awareness within which all bodies appear, including this one that plunks at the keyboard, as well as the one who asks this one a question about Jesus. Everyone, including the one who reads these words, is within myself, yourself, as awareness. This is self-evidently and undeniably true for each of us, even for the theologian who dismisses it as silly solipsism. His dismissal doesn't make it untrue. Identified as awareness, I look outside and see trees, flowers, people, and history in the making. All myself as awareness, going on in an unending now. I look out and see evidences of the past, history, and possibilities for the future. I look out and read history books and Bibles. I look out and see attracting, compelling, unifying things and ideas, which are all within this self-awareness. I look out, and despite all the teeth-clenching metaphysical absoluteness I am capable of, I still seem to see, distracting, repelling, dividing, and destructive things, all within awareness. Wheat and tares. The wheat and tares outside myself have an equivalent inside. The tree and the warm glow of the setting sun evoke a sense of beauty. The unifying things evoke a sense of harmony and joy. The distracting things and divisive scenes evoke discomfort, distress, disease, and so on. The obverse of this is true as well. I feel a sense of peace within and look outside, and see evidences of that peace as happy and harmonious things I might not have been aware of otherwise. Part of the mystery is the Christly admonition to make the inside and the outside into a single one. Let us examine this solipsistic fact for a moment. The first thing I see when I look outside is this body image at the typewriter, an image more sensitive to me than all the other images, from this objective point of view. Stick a pin in this image and I yell. Stick one in that image and I may yell, but I don't always feel the pain. My view seems to be limited to the purview of this first image, whose name is William, and who sits here at the typewriter. But it isn't. After these many years of subjective living, I have learned that awareness isn't limited at all, but can and should perceive from many viewpoints simultaneously, including some views little understood by the more distant images I see within myself when I look out, and especially not understood by my religious selfhood, nor even by my metaphysician friends who should understand. For that matter, awareness sees things undreamt by men. The belief which the world proclaims, and the beliefs, viewpoints I hear spoken out there in the people world, are written and spoken from the position that identity is that first thing I see when I look into the mirror. That body image, which is so sensitive, the world says, is our identity. This form and shape that sits here writing and answering your question is said to be the identity I am, an identity not unlike the form of the man who walked the hills of Galilee. But, clearly, to me, the body image is not my identity. Rather, the awareness that looks out and looks in, thinks out from that body is the identity I am. The awareness within which all bodies and trees and books and artifacts appear is my identity, as nearly as I can establish at the metaphysical level. My God, if I'm not but the body, and I'm a mere bucket of blood and a sack of tremulous pumps, if I'm only that, I am what my mother and father made. If I am life, I am what God made. Therefore, this awareness is the subjective identity I am and think of myself as. From this perspective, all tangibility, all things, thoughts, ideas, books, historic figures, and all history itself are within the awareness I am. And this awareness embraces every form of everything. Clearly, Moses spoke of this identity as having dominion over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. He also indicated that we lost our sight of it very quickly in the scheme of things. Well now, subjectively, metaphysically, some of the things I look at are more meaningful to me at one time or another. When it seems this first image within awareness, the William body, is hungry, food is a sight to enjoy. When I look at a unifying idea within the world of myself, I feel more satisfaction than when looking at or listening to a destructive idea, a dividing idea, or one that creates doubt and confusion in myself and in the world. But what about Jesus, for Christ's sake? My questioner thunders. He is the most unifying idea I have, my friend. But keep your shirt on. I'm answering your question reasonably, logically, step by step, leaving nothing out, which is the way the answer comes to us, okay? Your question will be answered if you will be patient. William Samuel, I tell you that Jesus is the blood of the Lamb. Jesus saves. Jesus is the way. Praise Jesus. Hallelujah. Thank you for such love, my friend. Now, let me answer that part of your question about the relationship of Jesus Christ and me as awareness. I was saying that identified as awareness, all my knowledge of anything and everything is within awareness, including the knowledge of Jesus Christ. It is exactly the same for you. All the Bibles of the world are knowledge that comes to us by way of awareness. I have no consciousness of the avatars, Jesus, mighty among them, except as they come to me here within and as this awareness. Would you agree with this? I'm lost. It seems so. If I'm lost, why am I trying to save you? You are not really lost, my friend, and neither am I. Let's get back to the subjective views of awareness. About Jesus Christ specifically, because this will answer questions for subjectivists who need to know as well. They especially need to get their metaphysics straight so they can get on with the rest of the work given them to do. Suppose I look outside that window of myself and suddenly, unexpectedly, see a special butterfly, a big, beautiful, flashing sparkle of ethereal light darting through the sky. I am delighted and thrilled. Something in me comes alive. I would like to know more about butterflies, and about that butterfly especially. What do? If that spectacular butterfly passes out of my sight and goes into history, I can still turn within myself to my expert friends, libraries, and books. I find a book on butterflies and learn more than I ever believed possible, because such books are filled with information, are they not? Incidentally, those books are an external confirmation of the wisdom you and I already are internally. We may not know that consciously yet, but that is partly what the human experience is about. One day I find a photograph of my special butterfly on page 1212. I get right down to a knowledge of everything about that special bug, and I'm so fascinated and excited. I pack my bags and make the necessary pilgrimage to Central America to the butterbug's winter home. I visit with hundreds of those particular butterflies to learn about them firsthand, eyeball to eyeball. Now, my friend, listen gently. The holy books of the world have come to me just like that special butterfly. I have gone to the experts and authorities and libraries of the world within myself to examine them further. The Bible, in particular, has flashed and flown through my experience countless hundreds of times, and I tell you, it is surely among the special flashing lights of my world. Inside that book, the story of the historic Christ, the Son of God, is among all the stories within myself, and the most influential record within this awareness. How so? Because something wonderful within me stirs and sings when I even think of that man's statements and parables. So, to finally answer your question right down to the bug's whisker, my friend, I have examined the words of many men within my holy books. But the words of Jesus and the words of Lao Tse are head and shoulders above all other words within myself except for my own. How so? Because those words of Jesus, subjectively understood, told me what to do with this first image, this body that talks to that body, and they told me how to live my subjective view in an objective and apparently divided world of conflicting stories, ideas, and people. And why are my words important to me? Because here, in this world of images, they reflect what I believe. My own beliefs influence my words, and my words bring results in my own subjective arena, here and now. Whose words put those shoes on your feet? The words in the Bible, or the words that came out of your own mouth? Whose words put you into your present church? But Jesus came to save the entire world, Mr. Samuel. In Jesus there is salvation. Have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior? You aren't listening, are you, my friend? Much more than acceptance. I have become one with the words from the Christ's mouth. I have become one with that one. Reading and rereading his words, I have come to learn the mystery of those words and stand as one with them. I have drunk those words and eaten them, and they have become me. The one who uttered them in human history came to confirm this identity I am and you are, and the two of us have become one identity. Furthermore, as the inner meanings of those words have come alive within me, this form you are looking at, my entire subjective world is being lifted up, even as I am lifted up in the honest and faithful understanding of his words. As I find God's grace via the words of the Christ and all other ways the light of Spirit comes, my world finds it too, just as you found me to come to and to ask your questions. As I am saved from the former identification, all mankind of myself can and is saved from that mistaken sense of things as well. As I surrender the deadly deception, I come alive as the Christ light for my own subjectivity, my entire world. And this is exactly what the Christ of the Bible told me to do, isn't it? I am doing those things with all the power and authority God has given me. At this point, I looked at the man who had come to ask me those questions, and he was sleeping softly. His wife looked at me strangely, shook her head almost imperceptibly, first one way, then another, as if she were thinking yes, yes, and then no, and then yes again. She wanted me to say something, but didn't or couldn't. Suddenly she burst into tears and threw her arms around me, saying, "Thank you, thank you." Her husband awoke, looking most bewildered. Sometimes I look out and see those images of myself hearing what I'm trying to say. Sometimes they seem to hear and understand. Oftentimes it is as if I were talking to a rock wall or a mud fence. But the one of myself who hears makes plain the one who doesn't. And the one who doesn't tells me I am to say it better and more clearly still, when I can, when, with God's grand grace, I can. In 10,000 years, the world hasn't understood the subjectivist yet. If the world knew how completely the transfiguration has taken place here as awareness, the world would be on the doorstep of the subjective idea, butterfly book in hand, asking questions, prepared to hear the deep things of selfhood. The tree of life is soon to blossom and seed. There isn't much time, of temporal time, remaining. Life is eternal. The mortal tree of life is not eternal. Ask me while you can, says the Christ light of love. The metaphysician asks a question. Dear Sam, you have answered the man's question logically. I understand how I should think of the historic Christ as the is not a mountain position. Now, will you tell me how to think of him from the is a mountain again position? Dear friend, the purpose of this book is to help you answer that question for yourself. No book alone will answer you fully. The answer, surrounded by the wilderness of time and space, lies within you and your own interface with God. Thine own right hand can save thee. Perhaps you should know it took 30 years to write the paper you have just read. It will not take you so long to answer your question for yourself. Just don't throw the historic Christ of the Bible out the window as science and some versions of metaphysics try to do. The child Messiah arrives as we get subjectivism straight. When the subjective idea is clearly in hand, one is able to complete the interface with the world. During the time the subjective idea is developing, one is curled up within himself like a caterpillar in a cocoon. He is living in the world, working in the world, but growing spiritually by leaps and bounds. That is understood. We can't complain about the stasis apparent in the religious, scientific, and metaphysical community, provided we finally perceive movement and progress on the parts of those who are getting their subjectivism straight. I submit that, with subjectivism clearly understood, one perceives for himself how to live it effectively on the objective scene of things. He lives his subjectivism objectively and remarkably in the world, and becomes a light that cannot be hidden. Then the third step arrives. The mountain becomes a mountain again. After a time of balanced living, the ongoing of us are brought to make the surrender of everything. This is part of the time of trouble, the messianic avatar carefully announced. The final secrets are to be revealed to those who are willing to surrender even their vaunted religion and subjectivism to know God, truth aright. This is the final surrender, and may very well already have historic as well as subjective confirmation as Judaism's choice to deny the messiahship of the historic Jesus. History records that Christianity indeed views the tangible and intangible Jesus as the living Son of God. Perhaps Judaism, by divine plan, rejected the Son, opting for the Father first and only. There is an objective reward for such a metaphysical position when the final trump is sounded. Perhaps, as the first group who will accept Messiah within the heart of themselves to be the original Christ child of God, the new covenant, for whom the prophet Jesus represents the historic evidence in confirmation, the man who made the surrender. Certainly Isaiah foresaw the child of God. Certainly Jesus identified as that child. It fits metaphysically that the discovery of the child within will very well represent Messiah to Judaism when the child within every man is found, and may even be found by the Christian community as well. But more likely, Jewish and Christian churchdom will fear for their dogmas, buildings, and numbers, especially worry about deceivers and refuse to listen to the child itself right in the heart of them. If so, the ministry of Jesus would be confirmed positively and subjectively. The prophets, including the confirming Christ of history, would be right once more. The child is the Savior. A child shall lead a remnant of children to New Jerusalem, a new dimension. I state as a fact of my own self-discovery, I walked the objective ground first. I walked the subjective discovery second. I lived my subjectivism in the world, discovering the remarkable balance about which I've written. Then I was pushed into total willingness of self-surrender. The surrender wasn't finished until I was willing to give up my most cherished self-beliefs. Even the teachings of Jesus seemed to be subservient before Godhead. Then I was given the keys to the kingdom, the secrets of the child, and the equation with which I proved the truth of the self-revelations and the teachings of the historic Christ. The point here, and I repeat it endlessly, is I was given nothing of the child and the child's equation until I was proven willing, after many years, to surrender even my joys of subjectivism, everything, even God, in obeisance to Godhead. What I have been shown since has been lived and proven, every step of the equation confirmed, attesting the primacy of God first, not the messenger of God, even when that messenger is the Son of God himself. I was finally made willing to surrender the Christ idea for God, perhaps a little like Abraham, and then the secret was given to me so that rather than lose that Christly ideal, I could become it. Since those days, all but a few things I was shown have come to pass, and what has not happened will, if the pattern remains as certain at its conclusion as it has been thus far in time. I see no reason it won't. In the world, resistance to truth is individual, then group-wide, then nationwide, then worldwide. Objectively, the groups will be shattered and shaken as the individual has been, then the nation, then the world. One does not have to be shaken if he moves on with God, but he will be destroyed if he doesn't. These words do not sound very metaphysical, but why do they have to? The truth isn't bound to meet human expectations. God is still a mystery to me, but the self I am, made in the perfect image of God, grows clearer every day, and those who heed these words will find what I have found. We become like the fountains we drink from. Religionists and metaphysicians drink from many fountains and have become a dilute nothing. There is a single fountainhead, God, for whom Jesus speaks. The words of Jesus, in Thomas and elsewhere, are true and faithful. Whatever I have had to say can be found in those words or in the words of Lao Tse, who addressed nature as himself. The man Jesus drank from the prophet's fountain, and I drink from his. Jesus came as the historic, linear confirmation of the child within, the first one willing to be the child of God. I announce the same child of God, present in the hearts of every man. I hail Godhead first. I hail God's original image, the child within, the elect of God. About the hard teachings. There are hard teachings that are not easy to tell of or hear, but as appearances go, these things must be said. One may believe he values the truth more than anything in the world, but when it comes to living the truth, by having to part with some of the old nature or the possessions he deems valuable, his belief becomes a horse of another color, one that bucks at the hard teachings. Those who call our attention to the hard teachings become burrs under the saddle blanket. For instance, there is a long journey in world time between, number one, the first idealistic feelings that one doesn't actually part with anything he gives to his world, and two, the fearless living of that truth wherein he learns for a fact that he doesn't. One of the purposes of the hard teachings is to bridge that gap. But woe to the one who takes such bridging information to a worldly man who loves his own opinions and his worldly possessions. With those people we are to be as cautious as a fox, my friend, and as harmless as a dove. This doesn't state the whole area of the hard teachings. A recent letter from Joanna puts another part of it straight. She writes that in the process of self-discovery, one finds the black side of the old nature as well as the good side. We come face to face with the dark side of ourself, the not-self. Yes, indeed, the suspicious side, the questioning side, the doubtful side, the withholding side. We find all sides before we find no sides. Joanna writes that the comfortable worldly man is titillated by the truth's insistence that he search out, find, and finally surrender the old nature of himself, but he recoils at the thought that his external world reflects the old nature's accumulations, which he must surrender as well. And of course, that is the crux of the matter. When we reach that point in our confirming climb of the mountain, we discover firsthand whether or not we are really willing to devalue the world and actually give a tangible value to the truth we hold dear. Most of us are not, until we are forced to, even though the truth can never be more valuable in our human affairs than the value we actually give it in the world. As Jesus says in the Gospel according to Thomas, many are standing around the cistern, but few are drinking the water. Nearly everyone who has come to Woodsong has heard of the child within us, but few have fully found it, or have waited to hear of the child's equation. Many hang up their shingles and begin practicing the subjective truth before they have a working knowledge of subjectivism, or any knowledge of the equation, much less the living of it. The secret of the equation has been well kept, but the time has come for the world to hear it again and heed. A new dimension awaits those who overcome. There is nothing covered that will remain uncovered, nothing hidden that will not be revealed. That time is this time, and there isn't much time of it remaining. Related papers 51 to 57. To find the balance is to find identity. To find the balance is to find identity, and identity leads the way to God. Surely 10,000 books have been written over the centuries about identity, what it really is, and how to find it. Essentially, the world's holy books are about identity and the real man, made in the image and likeness of God. There is little doubt among thinkers that the world view of identity isn't the correct view, and most would agree much more is to be understood. The problem, as always, is exactly how one goes about discovering his true identity. Don't tell me about identity, a letter says. Tell me what to do to find it. What follows is a what to do. Just as the inner child leads to Godhead, so balance leads to the child. The balance is to the child what alphabet is to writing. We learn the alphabet before we write. We learn about balance and live it. Lo, the child is discovered, and the child leads straight to identity. Heretofore, we have really been looking for the true nature of the old man. That one isn't identity and never will be. We find the child, and then we know the child is the real identity. Then we set out to understand the child of ourselves. When one has found the balance, he has found himself. One is the point of balance between all the 5 trees in the midst of the garden. Where is the balance between inside and outside if it isn't this very awareness I am? The inside passes through this awareness to the outside and returns from the outside and passes through me again. Where is the balance between above and below? Right here as awareness, midway between microcosm and macrocosm. And where is the balance between male and female? Here as awareness. Certainly not here as the body. This body appears more male than female. That body seems more female than male. But upon careful examination, the balance is found within the physical body, the body being both male and female, but tipped bodily one way or another. Between the extremes of gender lies awareness, this consciousness of being perfectly balanced identity, which is being all there is to both male and female. And so it is with all imbalances. The balance is found right here as awareness, identity. When the ancients said, one's aim in life is to know thyself, they were exactly right. One finds himself, identity, and finds he is the balance between spirit and matter, first and last, inside and outside, above and below, objective and subjective, the macrocosm and the microcosm. He will also find, slowly, that his self, as awareness, precedes all tangibility in time. Awareness is prior to the body we seem to be looking out of. One finds the divinity in himself before he sees it in another, and when he has actually found it in himself, he sees it in all others. But of course, we think we see it in others long before we see it in ourselves. A letter is here from a lady who is certain she has found God living in a commune on the West Coast, and she would have me agree that he is God. People are all the image of God, but not one image is God. God is God, and people are life's confirmation, life's image, as that image appears on the tangible scene. The godly man confirms God more obviously than do the warrior and thief. But to the godly, the sinner is as much the image of God as the saint is. Beware the man who says, I am God, or permits others to say that of him. Perhaps the only thing more sinful than proclaiming oneself to be God is to allow others to call him God. Certainly, one of the great measures of the man Jesus was his honesty on that score. Were Jesus on television this minute, he would say exactly what he said 2,000 years ago. When you see me, you see the Father, for my Father and I are one, but my Father is greater than I. And, of course, people would still call him God and good, and he would say once more, don't call me good, don't call any man good. There is none good but God. Don't call me master either. I am not your master. No genuine master lets anyone call him master. If I were to look up and suddenly perceive that I am indeed the perfect image itself, the firstborn of God, God's only begotten Son himself, I would yet be image and nothing of myself. Image is image. Image is nothing of itself. Image is without real power or authority except it be given to that image by Godhead. Godhead is the name, the authority, and the power, and not even the Son of God himself dares claim it. Inasmuch as Jesus, the man, made these honest and identical statements, that image appears Christly and extremely honest to me. It is when we become nothing that we become the door to something. The best door is the empty place without an impediment. The window that allows the light is the place where nothing is. One more paper on balance. We hear little on the subject of balance in our religious or metaphysical study, which is something of a surprise considering the absolute necessity of finding and maintaining it. One doesn't have to look far in the scientific, religious, or metaphysical scene to find evidence of woeful imbalances among people. We must conclude that since our return to a conscious knowledge of identity is much like a mountain climb, wherein we're busy confirming the truth of identity, then the climbing is integrally concerned with balance. If we lose it, we fall away from the center of identity into the chaos of imbalance. But there is more than one balance to find and maintain in our search for truth. There are several of them, each necessary in various places in our climb to confirmation. The first balance is the karmic teeter-totter between cause and effect, good and evil, just as much the province of science as religion. This, the first balance we really become aware of, is like walking a plank across a chasm. Living morally and honestly, one maintains his balance and doesn't topple into the reactive world of negative effects or punishment. It is the go and sin no more balance, and is absolutely basic. It is part of the do unto others as you would have them do unto you ethic. Beyond this linear karmic balance is another, higher on the scale of things. It is the balance we begin to maintain between the inner and outer world, the inside-outside equation. We see the image thing and strike a balance between the thing and the thought or feeling, the subject basis of the image. This is the province of metaphysics. Prior to, or simultaneously with, the metaphysical inner-outer balance is the hierarchical or cosmological equation. This is established consciously when the below of human authority is surrendered, precept upon precept, to the divine authority above, to which is given all power and importance until such time as the above, the ineffable, becomes all in all to us, and the below of us lives self-surrendered. When the surrender is made in actual fact, the new balance of things eventually brings us to do what is demanded of us. This, the reader knows, is the discovery that awareness is God's, not man's. It is the discovery of the real identity and the actions that accompany that revelation. This balance is also part of the Golden Rule. I hastily mention the male-female balance here. The discovery of awareness as identity mandates the acceptance of male and female equally. Awareness is as much female as male, as much male as female. We stop thinking of ourselves in terms of gendered man or woman, but as life, awareness, which is being all there is to the appearances of either gender. This balance is lived in the world as an equal appreciation for men and women. The lights of the world have been as thorough in their instruction of women as of men. It has been the organizations that followed them that began the discrimination and lower status of women. Overspreading all these balances and going on continually everywhere in nature is the divine balance and its equation. The very living process by which tangible life gives and receives, receives and gives, in-breathing and out-breathing, passing the light of life onward to those within and without, and receiving from the outside, and allowing it to pass along to the within. This is the divine balance and its equation, spoken of with such simple eloquence by Lao Tse, Buddha, and Jesus, among others, and misspoken in countless words of lesser truth by half-prophets who have never heard of the mystic's equation, nor dreamed it existed. The equation which comes with the child, the comforter, that leads to all peace. Our living it, consciously or otherwise, is the open door to the kingdom. The equation lived is the forgiveness of sins, imbalances. It is not the imbalance of too much action, like one who oversteps himself on the karmic plank and falls into sin, that is half so fatal to the metaphysician as the non-action of doing nothing. Intellectual and spiritual pride evoke a catatonia, a state of non-action in the world which assails one in later life. I see old seekers hanging on to their plateaus of understanding, absoluteness being one of the stickier wickets, where one grows thick, opaque, and stubborn, unable to break free, wondering what has happened to his truth when he needs it so much. On these wickets, one finds himself assailed by depression, ennui, hopelessness, and/or mental imbalances capable of dragging him to his tangible human finish. There is no escape from this deadliness by making positive affirmations or by declaring that God is all. The escape comes with living the equation again, the balancing child action of giving and receiving once more as we did when we were children and when we were new students of the truth. We allow the equation to work its magic in our affairs again. We pass the glimpses along to others, giving God what is God's, to receive therefrom. We give our tangible goods to those who need them, giving the world whatever we can of our substance, to receive therefrom. The balance and its equation have been in operation from the first breath we've drawn on earth. It is the real. It is where identity has always been in fact, standing atop Dashan, Kwang Se's mighty mountain, the entire world under its feet. The balance is the point of exchange between inside and outside, above and below, objective and subjective, male and female, God and man. It is, so far as I have been shown, the final balance. In this world of images, I have seen no one get to the balance of things without living the equation. Here, the metaphysician is last. This tangible echo in the world, this material body and its affairs, doesn't get to the top of the mountain by merely claiming that balance for himself, as metaphysics, poorly expressed, leads one to believe he can. Yes, it is true that a divine, perfect balance is the eternal fact of being. But here in the world of holographic imagery, we live the balance with our others, and this experience ultimately confirms the fact of balance in our comings and goings, right here among the nuts and bolts of the tangible scene. The idea grows so quickly and devilishly that, as seekers of truth, we know something that others don't. Just as quickly comes the vainglorious idea that there is no one with whom we can discuss these ideas. El poo-poo. The match struck in the dark corner of Deshawn's face has sufficient darkness to dispel. How the darkness is dissipated dawns slowly for us until we find one who has been given the equation, along with the means and courage to tell us of it. These living persons are rare, but there is a written record of many of them. Listen, listen. We are admonished to pass along the light we've grown to perceive to our entire subjective selfhood. Preach ye the gospel to all the world, said the one. Our work isn't finished until we do. When you make the two one, the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, then shall you enter the kingdom, has been admonished from the first. We live the primal balance consciously in our daily affairs and see it tangibly reestablished for our confirmation in our personal affairs in the world. This is to see thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Of all people within this experience I am, my metaphysical selfhood appears to understand the least of the great responsibility that comes with the truth. We have a mighty work to accomplish before we are done with the human drama and leave the slopes of Dashan. These ideas haven't been given to us for nothing. Everyone who reads these words is capable of living the equation. Not everyone will write a book about truth, but everyone is the book to himself and can help make certain that one is written, an honest representation of his own. Those who helped Paul write to the early churches are surely participants with him now, and he couldn't have written without their help. Most metaphysicians who have withdrawn from their organizations in the belief that they have a singular new track to follow appear to be doing from very little to absolutely nothing to help their Pauls and Johns, their Marys and Marthas. But to help is to live the equation and participate. As we do, we find the truth as valuable in our affairs as we have been willing to give it an actual value in our own experience of the world. That is how the equation works. If the truth isn't working in our affairs, we have stopped giving to it. If the world has given us nothing, we have stopped giving to the world. Many who have withdrawn from their organizations hear these words and are aghast and angered. Why? See how little they have given to their world. Surely the primary reason I have spoken directly of the equation only to those who were living it when they came to study here, and not one word about it unless they were, was to avoid the stigma so quickly given to all who speak of giving and receiving, no matter how honest their reason. No doubt there were those who must have thought the 12 baskets of food collected after the Sermon on the Mount was the selfish intent of the preacher. Our intellectual period, metaphysics, is the labeling time in our affairs when we are prone to divide singleness into levels of attainment, degrees of truth and error, shades of honesty or dishonesty, or into an absoluteness that tries to ignore the world of tangibility. I recall the charges made in Human Places that Goldsmith and his kind were mercenary and in it for the money, when no such thing was true. No wonder the mystics swore their initiates to secrecy concerning the hard teachings upon the penalty of death. Initiates were forbidden to speak directly of the ratio or the secrets. They needn't have been. The least mention of the equation brings one's personal world to thunder and shake, and whoever tells of it makes himself a sacrifice, not always willing. We are told that there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed, nothing covered that will not be uncovered. Now, I speak directly about the balance and its equation. I have waited in this human experience until the human charges can make no difference to me. Now it makes no difference how I reap the world's trash or treasure. They are the same, no more real or unreal than anything else in my world. I have waited until everyone can see there are no human motives in this statement of the final covenant, and never has been. We are told that every human imbalance, sin, is forgiven with a simple living of the grand balance and its equation, whether it is intellectually comprehended or not. With all my heart I know this is true. I watch the simple and the childlike who live the equation grow old with grace, dignity, and peace. Their bodies may appear to anguish, but their hearts still romp with angels. I see those who do not live it, though they have attained to mighty places in the hierarchies of intellectualism, wither and die without a trace of joy, without anything done for their world. God reveals the secrets of the living equation to children and hides them from the worldly. Zen Buddhism and Western Absoluteness. Zen Buddhism and Western Absoluteness are equivalents. Zen brings us to negate everything but isness itself. So does the absolute view. The second position, the is not a mountain aspect of development, as it is lived in the world, is represented in the illustration of Dashan by the town of Metadelphia and its extreme neighbor nearby, Absoluti. In Absoluti, even the houses have walls that reach the clouds, negating everything pertaining to the senses and allowing no light to break through the non-thought of thought or the thought about non-thought, the way of negation. Only is quite beyond the evidence of the senses. No explanation is given in Metadelphia as to why is-nots, sin, sickness, and death, continue to seem despite the rigors of absoluteness. One may hear the philosopher say, "I don't have to explain an illusion." Just beyond the walls of Metadelphia is the meadow of simplicity. With the help of the child within, we climb Metadelphia's wall, or pass through it, when we surrender the weight of the egotistical intellectualism performed in the name of non-existent ego. Beyond the wall, one comes consciously to the child of himself, skipping freely, joyfully, bounding from flower to flower, high place to high place, living the equation's balance all the way to the peak of realization, or non-realization, as the Taoists might say. There one learns why is appears to include is not, and what to do about it. The child allows us to move on to the third position, the mountain again. This time we see the new heaven and earth. The old views are understood and no longer have the power over us they had before. Occluding states of mind. How we feel about things influences what we see in the world. No question about that. Envy, jealousy, anger, hatred, greed, lust, fear, insecurity, and love are some of the occluding states of mind. Who can see the garden's morning blossom when he is frightened for his life? Who can enjoy a bird song when he's angry? Well now, we aren't so quick to recognize what these states of mind do to us. There are countless other occluding mental states as well. The engineer's bent for orderliness, the religionist's and metaphysician's predilection for study, the psychic's concern with things psychic, the scientist's examination of cause and effect, all tend to overlook the uncaused and mysterious. They overlook the obvious. The metaphysician's search for meaning behind words overlooks the reason for the words themselves. The religionist's concern for his organization holds him to that sense of things which might be out on the edge of things. The organizational metaphysician's loyalty to his group prevents his discovery of balance if the group isn't at the center of things. Human science has discovered evidence of a fifth force in nature, but to this point makes little connection between the perception of those forces and the human condition itself. Religious subjectivists generally ignore the connection, trying mightily to deny dualism, still unaware of the good reason for its appearance in the scheme of things. He calls half of himself unreal, pretending to ignore tangibility rather than understanding it. Human science very nearly touches the limits of microcosm and macrocosm, but fails to connect its findings to life itself, unaware that scientific search is an examination of living consciousness. This is the general rule I'm writing here, and there are certainly many individual exceptions to it. Whoever finds the child of himself becomes an immediate exception. The child is the guide, unafraid to move on with his seeking and finding. The child looks both ways, so to speak, and sees the principles of the objective studies as clearly as those of the subjective. The child takes us back to the beginning of the scheme of life through the reasons for theology, onward to the reasons for an examination of subjective thinking, still onward to be lived, experienced, balance for ourselves in the world. Thence, the confirmation. Confirmation is the provable link between tangibility and ineffability. Much of that link lies beyond the limits of sense, but not beyond the heart child within us. The child brings us to the victorious end of the human struggle for wealth, health, dominion, and power. The child leads us straight to itself. The child is the self of us, the soul. The child is life itself. The child is identity, made in the image of God. The child is precisely what the avatars discovered, marveled at, and identified as, none more beautifully than the historic Jesus. Natural human arrogance has us believe we are coming to understand God. Actually, we are coming to comprehend the pure, perfect, unfallen image of God. That much understood is a quantum move in the right direction. God understands God. Life is destined to understand life and is subservient to God. Religionists understand words like these, but old-time inline scientists and metaphysicians struggle with them. Life is God, some of them say. Well, of course, but God is more, and that lies beyond the limits of thinking. Thinking, and thought are one, but thinking and thought are subservient to thinker. By analogy, the television set and its functioning are one television set, but the functioning is within the set, and so is the picture, subservient to the whole. Being open to the new. The eternal now appears in linear time as newness. We anticipate newness and accept it willingly, adjusting to it as seems appropriate. Education adjusts to new wisdom, said Hahn. See how scholars rewrite their papers and begin new subjects. Governments adjust to new wisdom, albeit often unwillingly. See how they increasingly protect the rights of the governed. Science adjusts to new wisdom. See how quantum mechanics is working miracles in its midst. Technology adjusts to new wisdom. See how the small nations have learned to compete with the large. In the world of people, only churchdom, especially churchdom, refuses to adjust to new wisdom. It holds to the old creeds and dogmas the way the shell of the cicada holds to the emerging spirit within itself. In time, the living spirit emerges and the shell is cracked asunder. The groups that will survive in the days ahead are the groups who allow the little voices of living spirit to be heard, challenging the old ways. Love survives because it adjusts. Pilgrimages. We have endured many storms, Hans said to the little group. You have listened to my words and heard them well. Lee and Mary smiled in agreement. The minister nodded as well. The soldier sat motionless. Poking the fire, the soldier said, You have said many things that you haven't written about, friend Han. One can't write everything, Lee said softly, as much to himself as to the others. Aren't the written words what brought you here, soldier? Asked Han. I suppose so, the soldier answered slowly. Your written words said something to the heart of me, so I came to hear more. I was a stranger, and you took me in. He twisted the stick in his hand. I listened, and I heard. Have you heard beyond the words? The old man asked. Yes, the soldier answered, yes, indeed. What I heard has brought the written words to life. Pilgrimages are always rewarded, Hans said. Yes, the soldier smiled, 10 times 10. The metaphysician asked why the pilgrimage is rewarded. Because they require more than your thought, Han answered. They require your time, your effort, and your substance. They are like sending a root out into a fertile place. They are like turning a leaf toward the morning star. What good is a living fountain in your midst if you don't drink from it? The dimensionality of good. Evil has fewer dimensions than good. I stand in front of the mirror and make some comparisons. The image there looks just like me. If the lighting were dim, one might be hard-pressed to tell which was the real and which the reflection. But the images aren't the same. For instance, we know the image in the mirror is reversed. My right eye is its left eye. My left ear is its right ear. The clothing is reversed too. The candy stripes on my Hawaiian pants are leaning to the right on me and to the left in the mirror. There is yet another difference, as great as the difference between light and darkness. The image in the mirror has no authority. It can't see, it can't smell the aftershave lotion, it can't hear the songs I sing as I shave. It doesn't feel the nick of the dull blade, nor the hot water in the tap. The image in the mirror doesn't hear me saying, "Thank God I'm not the body alone. Thank goodness life is so much more than the body." Exactly as the image in the mirror doesn't have the same abilities as the one standing in front of it, so evil in the world doesn't have the dimensionality of good in the world. Exactly as the image in the mirror is limited to much less than the one standing before it, so evil in the world has nothing remotely resembling the power of good in the world. The sight of cancer may be terribly frightening, but I have learned something out of hard experience. The sight of the least little good that we enact in the world is capable of doing much more in the world positively than the appearance of cancer negatively. The key is the word enact.